Welcome back to Mystery Minds, the channel where we dive into the darkest corners of true crime, uncovering stories that shock, intrigue, and leave us questioning the world around us. In today's case, we bring you a chilling and twisted tale, one of betrayal, deception, and a deadly obsession. This is the story of the Imposter. A tale of jealousy, greed, and calculated violence. This case will leave you wondering, what lengths will someone go to when their perfect life is on the line? And how could someone so close, someone you trust, become capable of such unspeakable acts? Stay with us as we unravel the dark and tragic story of the Imposter. In the quiet town of Oak Ridge, nestled among rolling hills and sleepy suburbs, a tragic mystery unfolded, a tale so dark and labyrinthine that its mere retelling chills the bones. It began with a body, a man, unidentified, wearing another man's face. In the heart of Oak Ridge, the Hendersons were the epitome of suburban perfection. Their red brick home sat neatly at the end of Maplewood Lane, surrounded by a perfectly manicured lawn. Neighbors admired Sarah's effortless charm and Mark's generous donations to local charities. Together, they seemed like the kind of couple who had life all figured out. But perfection, as the town would soon learn, was merely a veneer. Mark Henderson was the CEO of a thriving logistics company, a business he had built from the ground up, or so he claimed. Colleagues described him as shrewd, ambitious, and a man who could charm the socks off a banker. Yet, despite his success, Mark was notoriously private. He avoided company social events, and his family history was a blank slate. "I came from nothing," he often said, brushing off inquiries with a humble smile. Sarah, on the other hand, was Oak Ridge's golden girl. As a volunteer at every community fundraiser, she was adored for her generosity and warmth. The perfect wife, the perfect life, or so it seemed. The illusion shattered on a foggy November morning. A hiker stumbled upon a body in the woods just outside Oak Ridge. The victim was male, mid-40s, and dressed in a sharp suit, but his face was unrecognizable. Burned almost entirely. His fingerprints identified him as Mark Henderson. The town mourned the loss of a beloved figure, but the grieving turned to shock as investigators uncovered a chilling discrepancy. Mark's dental records didn't match those of the body. Who, then, was lying in the morgue? And where was the real Mark Henderson? Suspicion turned to Sarah. While she publicly mourned her husband's death, police discovered an unusual detail. Sarah hadn't reported Mark missing, even though he hadn't been home for days before the discovery of the body. Her explanation was simple: he was on a business trip. But investigators weren't convinced. A search of the Henderson home revealed no evidence of Mark's recent travel plans. Instead, they found something far more unsettling: burned fragments of a passport bearing Mark's name but someone else's photo. The discovery opened Pandora's box. Neighbors began to recount odd moments: Mark's refusal to take part in family gatherings, his rare but heated arguments with Sarah, and his tendency to vanish for days without explanation. Slowly, a portrait emerged, not of a man with a perfect life, but of a man with a carefully constructed facade. The case took a darker turn when a second set of fingerprints was found on the burned passport fragments. They belonged to a man named Peter Caldwell, a convicted felon who had disappeared 5 years earlier. How were Mark Henderson and Peter Caldwell connected? And why had the life of one man seemingly erased the existence of another? The answers, as investigators soon discovered, lay buried in decades of deception, greed, and a desperate quest for reinvention. The revelation that the body found in the woods wasn't Mark Henderson sent shockwaves through Oak Ridge. Who was the man found burned beyond recognition, and why had he been carrying Mark's identification? As investigators began peeling back the layers of this mystery, the Hendersons' pristine image crumbled, revealing secrets no one could have imagined. The first step was to delve into Mark's financial records. On the surface, everything appeared normal. His business thrived, taxes were paid, and donations flowed generously to community causes. But deeper scrutiny uncovered anomalies: large, untraceable cash withdrawals, multiple offshore accounts, and the use of an unusual alias, James Wyatt. While Sarah claimed ignorance, the investigators found her name linked to one of these accounts. Though she insisted she was simply an authorized user for household expenses, this detail cast a shadow of doubt over her innocence. The authorities were faced with an unsettling question: had Sarah been complicit in whatever scheme Mark was involved in, Or was she yet another victim of his deception? But the financial trail wasn't the only clue that didn't add up. Forensic analysis of the body revealed a chilling detail. The deceased man had undergone extensive plastic surgery. His fingerprints linked him to Peter Caldwell, a small-time criminal who had vanished 5 years earlier, but his facial structure had been altered to resemble Mark. The revelation was as confounding as it was horrifying. The lead investigator, Detective Anna Morales, likened the case to a puzzle missing half its pieces. "It's as if someone tried to create a replica of Mark Henderson," she told reporters. But why? And what role did Mark himself play in all of this? The deeper the team dug, the stranger the case became. Witnesses began coming forward, claiming they'd seen Mark in nearby towns in the weeks leading up to the discovery of the body. A gas station attendant recalled a nervous-looking man resembling Mark buying a disposable phone. A motel clerk remembered him checking in under the name James Wyatt. Meanwhile, Sarah stumbled upon a discovery of her own. While sorting through Mark's office, now a chaotic scene of police investigations, she found a hidden compartment in his desk. Inside was a small, leather-bound journal. Its pages were filled with cryptic entries. "I can't keep this up much longer. The cracks are showing. The face isn't mine, but it's starting to feel like it is. If they find out it's all over, I have to act before it's too late." The journal painted a disturbing picture of a man spiraling into paranoia and desperation. But it also hinted at a larger plan, one that Mark, or whoever he truly was, had meticulously crafted. Detective Morales and her team began piecing together a timeline. They uncovered a pattern of disappearances in nearby towns, each bearing eerie similarities. In each case, a man in his 40s vanished, leaving behind few clues, but an unsettlingly clean trail, no witnesses, no family disputes, no financial struggles. It was as if these men had been erased. At the same time, Morales received a breakthrough from the forensic team. Analysis of Mark's personal belongings revealed traces of a rare sedative, often used in underground cosmetic surgeries. This was a game-changer. It suggested that the surgeries and identity swaps were part of a deliberate operation, one potentially involving a network of criminals specializing in creating imposters. But as the evidence mounted, so did the unanswered questions. Who orchestrated these surgeries? Was Mark a victim or a willing participant? And most chilling of all, if the body wasn't Mark, then where was he? The investigation took a sinister turn when another body was discovered, this time in an abandoned cabin 30 miles outside Oak Ridge. Unlike the first victim, this man hadn't been burned. His face was intact and it was identical to Mark Henderson's. Morales was faced with an impossible scenario: 2 men, both with Mark Henderson's face, both dead. The second victim's fingerprints revealed yet another identity: Christopher Lang, a man who had gone missing 3 years earlier. The case now hinged on the possibility that Mark Henderson wasn't a person but a constructed identity, assumed by different men at different times. It explained the offshore accounts, the aliases, and the carefully curated life in Oak Ridge. But it also raised a terrifying possibility: was the real Mark Henderson ever a real person at all? As the community grappled with these revelations, Sarah's world began to unravel. Strangers appeared at her door, claiming to be journalists, but their questions were invasive and accusatory. Neighbors withdrew their support, whispering rumors that she had known about Mark's double life all along. Desperate for answers, Sarah revisited the journal, hoping it might contain some explanation. On one of the final pages, she found a cryptic note. "When the time comes, the mirror will shatter. Only then will you see what's real." The note felt like a taunt, a final riddle left by a man whose life had been a tapestry of lies. But for Sarah and the investigators, it was also a clue, a glimmer of hope that the truth, no matter how twisted, might still be uncovered. As the pieces of the puzzle continued to emerge, one thing became clear: the imposter's web of deception was far more intricate than anyone could have imagined, and the most shocking revelations were yet to come. The discovery of the second body with Mark Henderson's face brought the case to a boiling point. Detective Anna Morales and her team faced a staggering realization: they weren't dealing with a single imposter. The operation involved multiple individuals, a network so deeply rooted that its implications stretched beyond anything Oak Ridge, or perhaps even the country, had ever encountered. The unraveling began with a deep dive into the financial connections tied to Mark's aliases. Offshore accounts led investigators to a private clinic in South America, known for offering identity reconstruction services. Patients were reportedly given new appearances, complete with fabricated histories. These operations weren't just for criminals evading justice, they catered to wealthy individuals seeking to escape their pasts. The clinic's records, obtained through an international collaboration, confirmed Mark Henderson under his alias James Wyatt had visited multiple times over the past decade. Even more shocking, a record from 5 years ago linked Peter Caldwell to the same clinic. Detective Morales couldn't ignore the growing pattern, a chain of men assuming a single identity, each erasing their former life in exchange for the illusion of Mark Henderson's perfection. But why this specific identity? Who had orchestrated the elaborate scheme, and what had happened to the real Mark Henderson, if he ever existed? While Morales pursued answers abroad, Sarah faced her own reckoning at home. Public sentiment had turned against her. The once beloved community figure was now seen as either a co-conspirator or a fool blinded by love. Both narratives painted her as complicit. Alone in her once vibrant home, Sarah began to reevaluate her memories of Mark. There had always been oddities: his reluctance to share details about his family, his constant travel, the locked drawer in his office. But she had never questioned him. Now she couldn't stop questioning. One night, while sorting through Mark's personal items, Sarah stumbled upon something she had overlooked: a second phone hidden in a hollowed-out book. Its screen was cracked, but it still worked. The messages on the phone painted a terrifying picture. Text exchanges revealed communication with an unknown number. The conversations were cryptic but hinted at Mark's awareness of the growing danger around him. "They're closing in. I can't hold this forever. If something happens to me, remember the cabin." The cabin. It was a reference to the place where the second body was found. Was Mark trying to leave her a clue, or was it a misdirect meant to conceal his own involvement? Sarah turned the phone over to Detective Morales, who was equally intrigued by the reference. A search of the abandoned cabin uncovered yet another layer to the mystery: a collection of fake passports, all bearing Mark's face with different names. There were also surgical instruments and detailed blueprints for identity reconstruction procedures. Most chilling of all was a set of photographs: dozens of men, all resembling Mark Henderson in various stages of transformation. Morales' team identified several of these men as missing persons. Each had vanished under mysterious circumstances, leaving behind lives of debt, criminal charges, or failing relationships. The clinic records revealed that the surgeries were funded by a shadowy organization in exchange for loyalty to an unknown purpose. This wasn't just about hiding identities, it was about creating a system of control. These men weren't merely becoming Mark Henderson, they were becoming pawns in a much larger game. For Sarah, the revelations were too much to bear. Each new discovery seemed to point toward her husband's active participation in the scheme. The journal entries, the offshore accounts, and now the hidden phone, all signs indicated Mark was more than a victim. But as Sarah reflected on their life together, she couldn't shake the feeling that she too had been targeted. Was her marriage simply another layer of the lie? Was she chosen to play a role in this facade, or had Mark truly loved her in his own twisted way? The answers began to take shape when Morales' team unearthed a final clue: a letter addressed to Sarah, hidden beneath a loose floorboard in the Henderson home. The letter, written in Mark's handwriting, revealed a confession. "I never wanted this life, but once I was in, there was no way out. They gave me the face, the money, the wife, but the cost was too high. I had to become someone I wasn't. You deserve better, Sarah. I'm sorry." The letter raised more questions than it answered. Who were they, and why had they chosen Mark to play this role? Detective Anna Morales' investigation into the shadowy organization, known as the Faceless, exposed a criminal enterprise that thrived on erasing and reconstructing lives. But the key to unraveling their operation was tied to one man: the original Mark Henderson. His story was the missing link, and discovering his true identity became a priority for Morales and her team. Mark Henderson's name first appeared in public records 15 years ago when he purchased a small home in Oak Ridge. Before that, there was nothing: no childhood records, no education history, no traceable family connections. This anomaly had always seemed curious but not suspicious, given Mark's claimed humble beginnings. Now it became a glaring red flag. The breakthrough came when investigators traced a patent linked to an encryption program called Veil. Designed to permanently erase digital footprints, Veil had been quietly sold to major tech companies under shell corporations. While it initially seemed like a legitimate product, Morales' team uncovered emails between Mark Henderson and a venture capital firm, revealing that the software's development was tied to a man named Matthew Cole. Matthew Cole had been a rising star in Silicon Valley 18 years ago before he vanished without a trace. Morales dug into Cole's past and found troubling details. A man known for his genius but also for his erratic behavior, including paranoid claims that powerful figures were watching him. At the time of his disappearance, Cole had been negotiating the sale of Veil. The deal collapsed when he went missing, and the product was thought lost until it resurfaced years later under Henderson's name. The evidence was overwhelming. Mark Henderson and Matthew Cole were the same person, but something had gone horribly wrong. The truth behind Mark Henderson's identity came to light through a former whistleblower from the Faceless. The organization, the source claimed, was always on the hunt for individuals with unique skills or resources they could exploit. Matthew Cole was one of their earliest targets, a man whose creation could ensure their operations remained undetectable. According to the whistleblower, Cole had been lured into a fake business meeting with promises of funding for Veil. Instead, he was abducted and taken to an undisclosed location. Over the next 2 years, he underwent a horrific transformation. Under duress, Cole perfected the encryption program, but that wasn't enough for his captors. They needed him to disappear entirely, replaced by an identity they could control. Plastic surgeons altered his appearance, erasing his distinctive features and molding him into the prototype of Mark Henderson. His old life was erased, his memories suppressed through psychological manipulation, and his new persona was carefully crafted to serve the Faceless. As Mark Henderson, Cole was introduced into society as a successful entrepreneur, a shining example of reinvention. His role wasn't just to generate wealth for the Faceless, but to act as a template for future recruits. Over time, the organization expanded its operations, creating more imposters in Mark's image. Each new Henderson inherited the polished facade of success, ensuring no one questioned the legitimacy of the identity. But the cracks in the plan began to show when the original Henderson Cole started to remember pieces of his past. Over the years, fragments of his old identity resurfaced, driving him to paranoia. The journal Sarah found in his office detailed these struggles, though at the time, no one could decipher the true meaning of his cryptic words. Henderson's rebellion against the Faceless began subtly. He diverted funds from the offshore accounts and reached out to contacts he believed could help him expose the organization. However, every move he made was closely monitored. When he started documenting the group's activities in his journal and leaving behind clues, he sealed his fate. This rebellion explains the events that followed. The man found burned in the woods, Peter Caldwell, had been one of the Faceless pawns, a failed Henderson who was deemed expendable. His murder served 2 purposes, a warning to Henderson and a diversion to throw investigators off the scent. The second body, Christopher Lom, was another failed recruit. Like Caldwell, he had been coerced into becoming a version of Henderson, but had resisted fully integrating into the role. His death was meant to eliminate loose ends, but it only deepened the mystery. As Morales pieced together the evidence, one haunting question remained. What had happened to the original Mark Henderson Matthew Cole? The answer lay in the cabin where Lang's body had been discovered. A forensic team uncovered a hidden compartment beneath the floorboards containing items that belonged to Cole, a photo of his family, a prototype of the Veil software, and a USB drive labeled Truth. The drive contained a chilling video recorded by Cole shortly before his final disappearance. In the video, Cole, disheveled and gaunt, addressed the camera directly. "If you're watching this, it means I didn't make it. They took everything from me, my face, my name, my life. But they won't take the truth. The Faceless are more than an organization. They're an idea, a virus. And they won't stop until no one knows who they really are. If you want to end this, you have to start where it all began." The video ended abruptly, leaving Morales and her team with more questions than answers. Where had Cole gone after recording it? Was he still alive, or had the Faceless finally silenced him? Morales' investigation revealed that Cole's case was not unique. Over the years, the Faceless had grown into a sprawling network with operatives worldwide. Their recruits ranged from petty criminals to influential figures, all bound by the same cycle of coercion, transformation, and servitude. The story of Matthew Cole Mark Henderson was the cornerstone of their operations, but it was also their greatest weakness. His defiance, even in the face of overwhelming odds, had left a trail of breadcrumbs that Morales was determined to follow. As the investigation moved forward, it became clear that the mystery of Mark Henderson wasn't just about one man. It was a story of power, manipulation, and the fragility of identity. The next step in the investigation would take Morales into the heart of the Faceless operations, a journey that promised even darker revelations. The climax of the case came when Morales confronted Sarah with the evidence. While Sarah maintained her innocence, one detail in the investigation stood out: she was the only constant in Mark's life throughout the years. Bank records revealed transactions tied to the Faceless under Sarah's name, dating back to before her marriage. A deeper probe into her past uncovered links to one of the missing men who had assumed Mark's identity. The final twist came during the trial. When confronted with overwhelming evidence, Sarah broke down. She confessed not only to knowing about the scheme, but to playing a key role in its execution. She had been recruited as a handler, a seemingly perfect partner to keep the imposters in line. Her marriage to Mark was a carefully staged act, a cover for her true allegiance to the Faceless. But when her husband began to question the organization, he became expendable. In the end, Sarah's betrayal shocked Oak Ridge to its core. The woman who had seemed like a victim was revealed as one of the masterminds behind the elaborate web of lies. Thank you for joining us on this chilling journey into the story of the imposter. This case reminds us of the terrifying lengths people will go to reinvent themselves and the devastating consequences of deception. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to Mystery Minds for more gripping tales of true crime. Until next time, stay curious, stay cautious, and keep uncovering the mysteries that surround us.